sun was setting over a small coastal town, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Life here moved at its own pace, fishermen hauling in their nets, children playing in the beach, and old men sitting by the pier, swapping stories of days gone by. It was an ordinary evening, or so it seemed. But something unusual had been happening lately. Strange lights flickered in the night sky, brighter than any star and moving with purpose. At first, the people thought they were satellites or shooting stars, but these lights didn't behave like anything anyone had ever seen before. They hovered, darted, and sometimes disappeared altogether. Rumors spread quickly through the town. Some said it was a secret government experiment. Others whispered about UFOs. No one really knew what to believe, but everyone felt it deep down. The calm was too perfect, too fragile. Something big was coming, and no one could ignore the unease settling over them. Far above the Earth in the cold silence of space, a fleet of alien ships hung in orbit. These weren't your typical Hollywood-style flying saucers. They were sleek, angular vessels that looked more like weapons than vehicles. Their name was the Vrin, a species known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and efficiency. Wherever they went, destruction followed, and now they had set their sights on Earth. On the third day after their arrival, the message came. It wasn't broadcast on television or radio. It simply appeared everywhere at once. Phones lit up. Computers displayed it without warning. Even billboards changed to show the same chilling words. Surrender your planet. Resistance is futile. Below the text was an image of Earth, surrounded by red lines forming a target. There was no sound, no voice, just those stark, unyielding words. Panic erupted almost instantly. People ran into the streets, shouting and crying. Governments scrambled to respond, holding emergency meetings behind closed doors. Military bases went on high alert, though no one knew exactly what they were preparing for. The Vrin hadn't attacked yet. They were waiting, watching, as if daring humanity to make the first move. In the midst of all this chaos, a retired military strategist received a phone call. He, or she, had spent decades leading troops in conflicts around the world, earning respect for their tactical brilliance. But that was years ago. Now they lived a quiet life, far removed from the battles and bloodshed. When the caller identified themselves as a high-ranking official, the strategist sighed, already knowing why they were being contacted. "You're needed," the voice on the other end said bluntly. "We don't have much time." At first, the strategist refused. They'd done their part, fought their wars, and lost too many friends along the way. What could one person do against an enemy that traveled between stars? But then the caller said something that made them pause. "If we don't fight back, there won't be anyone left to remember us." That night, the strategist packed a bag and headed to the capital. The journey was surreal. Streets empty except for soldiers patrolling in armored vehicles. Skies filled with searchlights scanning for signs of the invaders. Inside a secure bunker, world leaders gathered around a table, faces grim. Maps and satellite images covered the walls, showing the positions of the alien ships. Everyone spoke at once, arguing over what to do next. Some wanted to negotiate, hoping the Vrin might spare humanity if given enough resources. Others insisted on fighting, even if it meant certain death. The strategists listened silently, taking it all in. Finally, when the room fell silent, they stood up and began speaking. Their voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Yet we can't win by fighting their way," they said. "They're stronger, faster, and better equipped. If we go head-to-head, we'll lose. But we have something they don't: home field advantage. We know this planet better than they ever will. That's our edge." A plan began to take shape. Instead of meeting the Vryn head-on, humanity would use deception and misdirection. Fake retreats, abandoned cities, and hidden bunkers would lure the invaders into traps. Scientists worked around the clock to study fragments of alien technology recovered from earlier encounters, trying to turn the enemy's tools against them. Civilians joined the effort too, volunteering to build weapons, dig trenches, and serve as lookouts. For the first time in history, the entire world came together, united by a single goal: survival. But the Vryn weren't idle. On the second day of the ultimatum, they sent scouts to test humanity's resolve. Small groups of their soldiers landed in remote areas, probing defenses and gathering intelligence. Each encounter ended the same way. The humans retreated, leaving behind scorched earth and destroyed equipment. To the Vryn, it looked like weakness. To the strategist, it was proof that the plan was working. As the clock ticked closer to the 72-hour deadline, the atmosphere grew heavier. Families huddled together, saying prayers and making promises they hoped they'd live to keep. Soldiers checked their gear one last time, knowing full well they might not return. And the strategist stood alone in a darkened room, staring at a map of the world. The weight of responsibility pressed down on their shoulders, but there was no turning back now. "They expect us to withdraw," the strategist muttered under their breath, "but we're not going anywhere." And with that, the stage was set. Humanity had made its choice. The calm before the storm was over. The clock struck 0. The ultimatum had ended, and the world held its breath. For a moment there was silence. No explosions, no beams of light tearing through the sky. Nothing. People dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the invaders would leave. But then the first wave came. Alien ships descended from the heavens like vultures circling their prey. Their sleek, metallic forms glinted in the sunlight as they hovered over cities, scanning the ground below with cold precision. We, the Vryn, weren't here to negotiate anymore. They moved quickly, deploying ground forces to key locations across the globe. Massive machines stomped through streets, crushing cars and buildings underfoot. Smaller drones zipped through the air, firing energy blasts that reduced everything they touched to ash. It was chaos, pure and unrelenting. Yet despite the destruction, something unexpected happened. Humanity didn't break. In the small coastal town where this story began, and the people refused to give up, when the alien scouts arrived, they found the streets eerily empty. Doors were left open, windows shattered, and belongings scattered as if everyone had fled in a hurry. But it was all part of the plan. Hidden beneath the ruins of abandoned buildings, civilians armed with makeshift weapons waited silently. Old hunting rifles, sharpened sticks, even Molotov cocktails. They had turned whatever they could find into tools of resistance. When the Vryn soldiers stepped into what they thought was an easy target, the trap sprang. Explosions erupted from every direction, sending shock waves through the streets. Men and women poured out of hiding, shouting and charging forward with a ferocity that stunned the invaders. The aliens fought back, of course, cutting down many of the attackers with their advanced weapons. But for every human who fell, two more seemed to take their place. Word of these skirmishes spread fast. And the news outlets broadcast shaky footage of ordinary people standing up to the invaders, refusing to back down even when faced with overwhelming odds. Social media lit up with messages of defiance. Hashtags like #WeWillNotFall and #EarthUnited trended worldwide. People shared stories of bravery. A grandmother using her knitting needles to disable a drone, a teenager hacking into an alien communication system, a farmer rigging his tractor to explode and take out an enemy transport vehicle. When these acts might have seemed small, but together they added up to something much bigger: hope. Behind the scenes, scientists worked tirelessly to level the playing field. In secret labs buried deep underground, teams pored over fragments of alien technology recovered from earlier battles. At first, progress was slow. The Vryn's tech was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, built on principles of physics that defied understanding. But bit by bit, breakthroughs began to happen. A young engineer, barely out of college, figured out how to reverse engineer one of the drone's power cores. Another team managed to decode parts of the invaders' communication signals, giving them a glimpse into the Vryn's plans. One discovery stood out above the rest: a flaw in the aliens' armor. While nearly indestructible against conventional weapons, the material became brittle when exposed to certain frequencies of sound. Armed with this knowledge, the researchers developed a new type of weapon, a sonic emitter capable of shattering the Vryn's defenses. It wasn't perfect, and producing enough units to make a real difference would take time, but it was a start. Meanwhile, hackers played their own crucial role in the fight. Using the decoded communication signals, they infiltrated the Vryn's network, planting false data and disrupting their operations. Entire squads of alien soldiers were sent to investigate phantom threats, and only to find themselves ambushed by waiting humans. The invaders grew frustrated, their confidence shaken. They had expected humanity to crumble under pressure, not adapt and fight back with such tenacity. At the heart of it all was the strategist. From a command center hidden beneath a mountain, they coordinated the global resistance effort. Maps lined the walls, marked with pins and lines showing troop movements, supply routes, and potential targets. Every decision mattered. Every move counted. Sleep became a luxury they couldn't afford, but they didn't complain. There was too much at stake. One evening, as the strategist studied a report on the latest battle, a young engineer approached them. She, or he, was the same person who had cracked the drone's power core, and their face was flushed with excitement. "We did it," they said, holding up a prototype of the sonic emitter. "It works. We tested it on a piece of captured armor, and it shattered like glass." For the first time in days, the strategists allowed themselves a small smile. "Good work," they said. "Now we need to get these into the hands of our fighters. Fast." But even as victories mounted, the cost of the war weighed heavily on everyone. Cities lay in ruins, their populations displaced or worse. Families mourned loved ones lost in the fighting. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, and food shortages began to plague areas cut off from supply lines. One of the strategists saw it all: the pain, the suffering, the sheer exhaustion, and it gnawed at them. Was this worth it? Could humanity really win against an enemy so far beyond them? Then late one night, they received a message from a frontline commander. A group of guerrilla fighters had managed to destroy a Vrin supply depot, crippling their operations in the region. The footage showed flames engulfing the facility, alien soldiers retreating in disarray. It wasn't a decisive blow, but it proved something important. The invaders weren't invincible. As the strategists watched the video, they felt a spark of determination reignite within them. Humanity wasn't just surviving, they were fighting back. And with each victory, no matter how small, they grew stronger. The Vrin still held the advantage, but their arrogance was becoming their downfall. They had assumed humanity would collapse under the weight of fear and despair. Instead, they had awakened a spirit of resilience that refused to be extinguished. "They thought we'd withdraw," the strategist muttered, staring at the burning depot on the screen. "But we're just getting started." The tide was turning, but no one dared to celebrate just yet. The victories were small, scattered, and hard-won, but they added up. Every destroyed drone, every sabotaged supply line, every ambush that left the invaders reeling, it all mattered. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. It was fighting back with everything it had. And yet the Vrin still held the upper hand. Their ships loomed in the sky like dark clouds, casting long shadows over the earth. They controlled key cities, their machines patrolled the streets, and their soldiers hunted down resistance fighters with ruthless efficiency. But something had changed. The invaders weren't invincible, not anymore. In the heart of a dense jungle, far from the prying eyes of alien patrols, a group of guerrilla fighters gathered around a makeshift campfire. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering light on their tired faces. Some wore tattered uniforms, remnants of armies that no longer existed. Others were civilians who had picked up arms for the first time in their lives. They came from different walks of life, but now they shared a single purpose: to drive the invaders out of their home. One of them, a wiry man with dirt-streaked cheeks, he held up a piece of alien tech, a small glowing device salvaged from a downed drone. "This is what we've been waiting for," he said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "If we can figure out how to use it, we might be able to take out one of their command centers." The others leaned in closer, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Command centers were the nerve hubs of the Vrin's operations, coordinating their forces and relaying orders from orbit. Destroying even one would deal a massive blow to their control. But getting close enough to strike wouldn't be easy. The centers were heavily guarded, surrounded by layers of defenses that seemed impossible to breach. "We'll need a distraction," another fighter suggested, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar running along her jawline. "Something big enough to pull their attention away from the target." The group nodded in agreement. Distractions were risky. They often meant sacrificing lives, but they were necessary. Without them, the mission would fail before it even began. As the fighters planned their next move, hundreds of miles away, the strategists sat in the dimly lit command center, poring over reports from across the globe. Each update brought both hope and heartbreak. Hope because humanity was proving itself capable of standing up to the invaders. Heartbreak because the cost of that defiance was written in blood. So on the screen in front of them, a map showed the locations of ongoing battles. Red dots represented Vryn's strongholds, while green ones marked areas where humans had gained ground. Slowly but surely, the green was spreading. It wasn't much, but it was progress. The strategist zoomed in on one particular region, a desert stretching endlessly under the scorching sun. Deep within that wasteland lay one of the largest Vryn command centers. If it could be taken out, it would cripple their operations across an entire continent. But there was a problem. The center was protected by a shield, an invisible barrier that repelled any attack. Scientists had been working day and night to find a way to disable it, but so far nothing had worked. Until now. A breakthrough had come earlier that day, delivered by the same young engineer who had cracked the drone's power core. They're using a frequency modulation to maintain the shield, the engineer explained, pacing back and forth in front of the strategist. If we can broadcast a counter frequency at the right intensity, we can disrupt it, temporarily at least. The strategist's eyes narrowed. How long? Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. It wasn't much time, but it was enough. With the shield down, even briefly, a concentrated strike could penetrate the defenses and destroy the command center. The strategists called together their top advisors, laying out the plan. It was risky, reckless. But they didn't have the luxury of caution. This was their chance and they had to take it. The operation began at dawn. In the desert, a convoy of vehicles moved toward the command center, carrying explosives and volunteers who knew they might not return. At the same time, teams of hackers launched a coordinated cyber attack, flooding the Vryn systems with false data and overloading their networks. Drones equipped with the new sonic emitters flew overhead, as targeting enemy soldiers and clearing a path for the advancing convoy. As the convoy neared the shield, the engineers activated the counter-frequency device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a faint hum, the barrier flickered and vanished. Cheers erupted from the convoy as they surged forward, racing against the clock. Behind them, the shield reactivated, trapping anyone too slow to make it through. Inside the command center, chaos erupted. The Vryn hadn't expected this level of coordination from their opponents. Alarms blared as human forces breached the outer defenses, engaging the alien soldiers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Explosions rocked the structure as charges were set, collapsing walls and sending debris flying. Amid the mayhem, the young engineer stood near the edge of the battlefield, clutching a tablet that displayed the shield's status. Sweat dripped down their face as they monitored the countdown. "At 10 seconds, they shouted, their voice barely audible over the din. The fighters inside the command center heard the warning and redoubled their efforts. One of them, a former soldier with a prosthetic arm, hurled a grenade into a cluster of alien troops, clearing the way for the final push. Another, a teenager who had joined the resistance after losing their family, planted the last charge deep within the heart of the facility. 5 seconds. The fighters sprinted for the exit, dodging falling rubble and energy blasts. Outside, the convoy waited, engines roaring, ready to evacuate the survivors. 2 seconds. A massive explosion tore through the command center, sending a shock wave rippling across the desert. The blast lit up the horizon, a fiery testament to humanity's determination. The shield collapsed entirely, leaving the once impenetrable fortress in ruins. For a moment, there was silence. Then cheers erupted from the convoy and the fighters alike. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a devastating blow to the invaders. But the strategists knew better than to celebrate. This was just one victory in a war that was far from over. The Vryn still controlled most of the planet, and their retaliation would be swift and merciless. Yet as they watched the footage of the smoldering wreckage, a glimmer of hope flickered in their chest. "They underestimated us," the strategist murmured, their voice barely above a whisper. "They thought we'd give up, but we're not done yet." Across the globe, people saw the destruction of the command center as a turning point. Resistance cells grew bolder, launching attacks with renewed vigor. Civilians rallied behind the fighters, offering whatever support they could. Even those who had once doubted humanity's chances began to believe that victory was possible. The Vryn, however, were not so easily shaken. Their commander, a towering figure clad in shimmering armor, stared at the reports of the failed defense. For the first time since arriving on Earth, doubt crept into their mind. These humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. They adapted, improvised, and refused to surrender, even when faced with overwhelming odds. "They are resilient," the commander admitted to their second-in-command. "But resilience alone will not save them." Back in the command center, the strategist turned to the team. "We've shown them we can fight. Now we need to show them we can win." And with that, the stage was set for the final chapter of humanity's struggle. The final battle loomed on the horizon, and the air was thick with anticipation. Humanity had proven itself time and again, striking blows that shook the invaders' confidence. But now it was time for the ultimate test. The Vryn still controlled vast swaths of the planet, their ships dominating the skies and their machines patrolling the ground. Yet, cracks were beginning to show in their once impenetrable facade. Their arrogance had blinded them to humanity's greatest strength: unity. And as the strategists prepared for the climactic showdown, they knew this would be the moment that decided everything. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a hidden bunker carved into the side of a mountain, the resistance gathered for one last briefing. Maps covered the walls, marked with red circles highlighting key targets. The largest circle surrounded a remote desert region where the Vryn's central command center stood, a fortress-like structure protected by layers of defenses and guarded by elite troops. This was the heart of the invasion, the nerve center from which all orders flowed. If it could be destroyed, the invaders' grip on Earth would crumble. The strategist stood at the front of the room, their face lined with exhaustion, but their eyes blazing with determination. "This is it," they said, their voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "We've fought hard to get here, and we've paid a heavy price. But if we succeed today, we can turn the tide. We can take back our planet." Around the table, heads nodded solemnly. These were the leaders of the resistance, soldiers, scientists, engineers, and ordinary people who had risen to extraordinary challenges. Each of them carried scars, both visible and invisible, from the battles they had endured. Yet none of them hesitated. When they had come too far to give up now, the plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. It involved splitting their forces into three groups. The first would launch a diversionary attack on a nearby Vryn stronghold, drawing enemy reinforcements away from the central command center. The second group would infiltrate the facility using tunnels dug secretly over the past weeks, planting explosives deep within its core. The third and most dangerous group would engage the Vryn directly, be holding the line long enough for the others to complete their missions. As the teams dispersed to prepare, the strategists took a moment alone. Sitting in the dim light of the bunker, they stared at a photograph pinned to the wall. It showed a family smiling together, taken years before the invasion. That family was gone now, lost to the war. The strategists clenched their fists, pushing aside the grief that threatened to overwhelm them. There would be time to mourn later, if there was a later. Dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The air was dry and hot, carrying the faint scent of dust and smoke. In the distance, the Vryn command center rose like a monolith, its metallic surface gleaming under the sun. Around it, alien soldiers patrolled in tight formations, their weapons ready. They expected an attack. They just didn't know when or where it would come. Suddenly, the horizon erupted in flames. Columns of smoke billowed into the sky as explosions tore through the nearby stronghold. The diversionary team had struck, their assault fierce and unrelenting. Alien reinforcements scrambled to respond, leaving the central command center vulnerable. It was exactly what the strategists had hoped for. Under the cover of chaos, the infiltration team moved in. Dressed in camouflage and armed with sonic emitters, they slipped through the tunnels like shadows. Above them, the sounds of battle echoed, the clash of human ingenuity against alien technology. Every step forward felt like walking on thin ice, each breath held in fear of triggering an alarm. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Vryn officers barked orders, trying to coordinate a response to the sudden attacks. Screens flashed with data, showing troop movements and damage reports. For the first time since arriving on Earth, the invaders looked uncertain. Their commander paced back and forth, their armored boots clicking against the floor. "Find the source of the attack," they growled. "Eliminate it." But the humans were already inside. The infiltration team reached the core chamber, a massive room filled with glowing consoles and humming machinery. One of them, a wiry engineer with grease-streaked hands, set to work planting explosives while the others kept watch. Time seemed to slow as they worked, every second stretching into eternity. Outside, the sound of gunfire grew louder, signaling that the third team was holding the line. But for how long? Finally, the last charge was set. "We're done here," the engineer whispered, their voice trembling with relief and adrenaline. "Let's move." They retraced their steps through the tunnels, hearts pounding as they heard the distant rumble of collapsing structures. Above ground, the fighting raged on, while the third team, battered and outnumbered, refused to yield. Civilians joined the fray, wielding whatever weapons they could find. Together, they formed a wall of defiance, buying precious seconds for the infiltration team to escape. When the charges detonated, their explosion was deafening. A shock wave rippled outward, sending chunks of metal and debris flying in all directions. The command center collapsed in on itself, a towering symbol of alien domination reduced to rubble. Cheers erupted from the resistance fighters, their voices raw with emotion. They had done it. They had struck a mortal blow to the invaders. High above the earth, aboard the Vryn flagship, the commander watched the destruction unfold. Their expression was unreadable behind their helmet, but their posture betrayed a flicker of doubt. For centuries, the Vryn had conquered worlds without resistance. Now they faced a species that refused to surrender, even when faced with extinction. A withdraw, the commander ordered, their voice cold but tinged with frustration. Regroup and reassess. The order spread quickly, relayed to every Vryn unit across the globe. One by one, their ships began ascending into the sky, leaving behind the ruins of their failed campaign. Below, humanity watched in stunned silence as the invaders retreated. It wasn't a total victory. The scars of war would take generations to heal. But it was enough. Earth belonged to its people once more. In the days that followed, the world came together in ways no one had thought possible. Monuments were erected to honor those who had fallen, their names etched into stone as a reminder of the sacrifices made. Cities began to rebuild, rising from the ashes stronger than before. The strategist stood atop a hill overlooking the coastal town where it all began, watching as life slowly returned to normal. Children played on the beach, fishermen cast their nets, and old men swapped stories by the pier. "We did it," someone said, standing beside them. It was the young engineer, their face lit with pride and exhaustion. "We actually did it." The strategist nodded, a rare smile breaking through their weary expression. "Yes," they replied softly, "we did." But as they gazed out at the horizon, they couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humanity had proven its resilience, its ability to unite in the face of impossible odds. And though peace had been won, the strategist knew it was a fragile thing, one that must be cherished and protected. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. The war was over, and Earth was free. Against all odds, humanity had fought back and triumphed.